pure mental. Right, so Farah Haroon, MMA journalist, MMA junkie, UFC Arabia, and we can't forget UFC News Alerts. Appreciate you coming on MMA Lowdown. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm good. Just looking forward to chatting to you. I've been a fan, supporter, follower for quite some time now. So, anyway, we'll just jump right into it. So, Fight Week, UFC 264. Is it a very hectic type of week for you?
Yeah, I think it's for everyone who covers the sport, right? Like, because it's such a massive card with big fights, a lot of names. I mean, even if you look all the way down to the prelims, it's super stacked. A lot of
Yeah.
exciting fights that are flying under the radar and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's busy for it's even tiring as a fan. I feel even if you're just a fan of the sport, there's so much content out there. So but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like it says, if you're looking at the events, the press conferences, the embedded, all the individual stuff, just as a spectator, that's mad. So when you're covering it on a basis like yourself and then myself to some extent as well, it's yeah, it can really take up a lot, certainly when you've got a lot of stuff going on. So are you tending at this stage to do a lot of virtual stuff? Like, were you hoping to get there and maybe do a lot more direct work?
No, I wasn't planning on going. I tend to just cover the shows that are in the Middle East. So just when the UFC goes to Abu Dhabi, maybe down the line, I hope so. It's just hard right now anyway with COVID and stuff like that, trying to get visas and stuff. I think all the offices are closed. I think the first available appointment is like 2022 as things stand. So I wasn't even thinking about it because I knew it was going to be super hectic and I didn't want to drain my energy on trying to get there. But I do plan, hopefully in the future, at least doing maybe once or twice a year, Vegas, New York, or something like that. But wasn't planning on doing it this year just because I knew it was going to be really hard.
Well, you're on a tight ship as it is. So I think what you're doing now works out just fine, I imagine.
Yeah. Just doing the stuff for Abu Dhabi Media and then MMA Junkie as well. Yeah, it's it's
Yeah.
busy enough.
Busy, busy. So UFC 264. So how are you feeling about it overall? So we've seen a lot of hype going into this one for many reasons. For yourself, being a representative of UFC Arabia, MMA Junkie as such, does this feel different for you compared to like the last couple of events?
Yeah, for sure. Just everything is bigger. The magnitude of everything is bigger. Like I said, there's just so much to cover. It's not like maybe the beginning of the week was a little bit quiet, but just overall, as soon as the press conferences and the media days roll in and stuff, there's just so much content, and you want to give everyone their due. And we do a great job of that at MMA Junkie. I believe MMA Junkie have always been like that, like giving every fighter their due. We write articles for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So going through all the kind of their interviews and media day and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, obviously some of these fighters could be even headlining fight nights, or the focus would have been mainly on them. But when you're on a McGregor card, it's a little bit hard sometimes. But yeah, it's just been it's been busy. There's a lot of content, and you just want to make sure you give everybody their shine. And yeah, it's harder than a regular fight week, of course, but we managed to get it done.
Yeah, I can't even imagine it. So I just want to jump back a little bit, right? So up until this point, and we could see at this point you're still pretty early in your career in terms of what you're hopefully going to be aiming to do. So how did this all start for you? So me, Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, UFC 81. I was a wrestling fan who somehow transformed from there into what we're into now. How did it start for yourself?
I did watch pro wrestling as a kid as
Did
well.
you?
Yeah, very, very young. I remember being like 7 or 8 watching with my brother, and it was the same thing, having, your side of the world as well, having to stay up late hours. It was more like, instead of Monday Night Raw, it was more like Tuesday morning Raw for me. So,
Yes.
I remember those days. So I was always like kind of a pro wrestling fan. I did Taekwondo as a kid. That's pretty much as far as it
All
goes in
right.
terms of
Okay.
my personal, but I never knew that I was going to become such a big MMA fan, let alone
Mhm.
cover it. But in terms of like MMA, probably like 2007, 2008, my brother was showing me a lot of like WEC stuff, a lot of the UFC stuff, Anderson, George St. Pierre, BJ Penn, Matt Hughes, a lot of those guys. And then some of the WEC stuff. And then Ultimate Fighter, I was a big fan of that. That helped me
Yeah.
really get into the sport as well. So just bits and pieces I wasn't like a diehard fan. And then I think I started like probably religiously watching the sport maybe around 2010 or 2009. But really like focusing in terms of like watching everything, the lead up, the press conference, the weigh-ins, the prime time, I think it was called, Dana White's vlogs, all that stuff back in the day. That was probably Silva Son and One is what really like made me understand that there's so much more to it than just the fight.
And it wasn't always like that as well. I mean, all this kind of build-up stuff, we never had that before. So it just kind of creates this big ball for us to kind of engulf in. So it's brilliant. So who's your favourite wrestler then? If we're going back to wrestling, did you have any in particular?
I'm trying to remember, like, I had a few, but I really like The Rock because I realized I have a lot of his stuff, like, I still have some of it, like, lying around in my house. So obviously I was a big fan of his. I like Stone Cold Steve Austin as well. I
Yes.
like the Hardy Boys. I like there's a lot of I like a lot of guys. I tend to like the face, not the heel. I noticed. So when they're a face, I used to like them. When they turn heel, I remember I used to get upset as a kid because I used to really believe it and stuff like that. So I never really liked the heel. My brother loved the heel. He loved like Triple H and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember The Rock. I have a lot of like early memories. I remember his fight with Hogan, WrestleMania 18. I was like, that for me was like one of my favorites ever. But yeah, I'd say probably if I had to pick one, probably The Rock.
Do you follow wrestling at all now?
No, I don't.
No.
I don't.
Yeah, to be honest with you, same as you said there, I was into all those people, babyface, heel, pretty much the same. Right now, the wrestling product doesn't feel quite the same. It seems to be changed. Perhaps that's why we're into this sport as much, because it kind of keeps me excited and keeps me on the ball. So, UFC news alerts. The last time I checked, 264k. Now, I remember seeing it with 5k. So, anybody chasing their goals, first of all, what you do is a complete testament to that. Now, so few managed to get there. It's a long grind. Was there any moments for you that you were like, you know, you're doing your groups, you're doing your pages, you're putting a post up. Some people care about engagement. Some people just want to kind of do what they're doing. Was there a moment for you that you noticed a change and it was like, oh, there's a kind of momentum change here? Was there anything that stands out?
I think because I wasn't like when I first started it, I used to post a lot of kind of random stuff, but I was never kind of just posting complete nonsense. I wanted to keep it purely like news, hence the name. But I think what I realized, what made me like really kind of get attached to it and wanting it to grow was when fighters, like newcomers, I felt like, because when I reached, let's say 10K or 20K, that was sometimes 5 times more than a newcomer would have. So when it meant a lot to them that I would post about their fight and I'd get DMs from certain fighters and they would repost the picture, I'm like, this is cool. This means something to them, because I know most of these pages won't give kind of the lesser names a platform. They'll only be posting about like Conor and Poirier and Adesanya and the big names. So that's what I wanted to do. The whole point of this was to give every single fighter. And the reason why I focused on the UFC, because otherwise it wasn't going to be an efficient product if I did all the organizations. That was going to be impossible to keep up with. Plus, I would have been an overflow of posting that would have probably bothered some people. I would have ended up having to post like 50 times a day. So I focused it on the UFC. And when I noticed, like, I remember posting Brian Ortega's first fight when he was RFA champ coming into the UFC. Awesome. And I think he used the picture and stuff like that. And I remember, like, these guys, barely anyone knew who they were. So to see them, to see that it meant something to them, and it still happens to this day when a newcomer would come in and stuff, especially the platform that I have now and the contacts I'm giving them. And I know they're going to get a lot of the who the fuck is that guy type of comments and stuff like that. But those guys a lot of them go on to become something. So it's cool to look back and give them that platform. That's what it was all about for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people who's had the same type of agenda. Now, for me in the past, I've tended to think that I can be this jack of all trades, if you will, where I'm like PFL, Bellator, UFC, Combat Americas. I'm going to cover you all. But yeah, it feels impossible, certainly if you're doing a kind of one-man ship. And what I felt, maybe perhaps you might identify with that as well, when you're promoting so many different companies and stuff, the fighters that, as you said, you're trying to bring up, maybe your commitment might not look as much if you're kind of throwing yourself all over the place. It's better to narrow it down. Would you say so?
Yeah. And I think you don't necessarily have to narrow it down to an organization. with me, because obviously MMA in the Middle East isn't big at all. I mean, now it's grown a lot. You've got local organizations like Brave, UAE Warriors, but years ago, there was Desert Force, but I mean, like, it wasn't on an international stage.
Yeah.
So I kind of had an opposite approach. I said, instead of starting out by covering the Middle East, especially if I had no name, no following, and they're looking for someone to give them a platform, it just didn't make sense, because I'm like, how am I going to benefit them? It's going to be more like me trying to benefit off them. So what I did was I targeted the UFC because I knew that was the fastest way to gather an interest, a following, build contacts, all that stuff. And then once I did that, that's when I started traveling around the Middle East. Because I remember going to UFC London, Silva Bisping, and then I planned to go to so many fight nights around Europe, which is obviously closer to home, Copenhagen, this and that. And then I'm like, you know what, I'm going to invest this time in really, really learning about the Middle East market, because you can go online, but there isn't that much online. So I'm like, I need to be there. I need to learn about them. I need to watch them fight and be around them. And that's what I did. I spent like probably from 2017 to 19 or late 2018, just traveling all over the Middle East, like Jordan, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, all these places to cover local shows. And I had built a bit of a following already, contacts, journalistic contacts, and I felt like I was benefiting them. So I was learning about them, but at the same time, I felt like I was benefiting them. So it's only kind of like finding your niche. But that was the reason why I started with the whole like UFC newsletter, or just covering the UFC, because that was my fast way. Especially being on this side of the world, I knew I had to kind of work double as much as the average person, at least in the US and stuff. So that's why I took that approach.
No, I can see what you're saying. And like you say, it's about a niche market. Every second person, it seems, in some cases in America would have been doing it. So for yourself, a niche in itself due to your geographic location, and then, of course, trying to build up a market where people might not know about it as much. So, yeah, that's awesome. So just talking about following. So, of course, you've got your journalistic following and your connections through fighters and agents and all that, right? But whether you see it yourself or not, I've noticed quite a following that you've got just from the MMA fans in the community. Now, did you expect this? I mean, pages on Instagram, UFC news alerts, I mean, your photo's not on them. There's of course, in the bio and stuff, you've got an association with it, but most pages remain faceless. More content rather than the individual. Did you expect this to happen, like your own personality to kind of stand out on the outside of that?
Honestly, no, because I was hiding behind a camera for years. Like I like everyone used to think I was like some dude that lived in the US. I think Alan Joban said it best when I first like contacted him for an interview. I had to, because I was doing I started off by sending questions. Like that's how intimidated I was about the idea of just talking or being on camera. And then eventually it turned into phone. But I'm like, kind of have to tell them who I am. That's weird to not like introduce. So eventually I knew that I had to get away from, even my Twitter handle was UFC Newsletter, so it wasn't my name. And then I knew eventually that I had to like branch out. If I wanted to turn this into a career, I couldn't just be UFC Newsletter. So that transition was very, very weird, because it kind of freaked out a lot of people. And I remember like wanting to, like before I interviewed Alan Joban, and he was so shocked. He's like, I thought you were a dude in California or something. So yeah, like that was the general impression that most people got just like following my page. So yeah, I mean, it was hard. It was hard because I was behind this account for like 3 years. I didn't even show my face or even say like who I was. And then I tried to slowly do that transition first through Twitter. And then eventually, like I started doing IG lives and stuff. I'm like, and I still get it to this day when I switch on my IG live. They're like, what? Like, you're a girl, or who are you? Or like you run this page or whatever. So yeah, like I never wanted to do it. I'm not too keen on the whole camera thing. I never was, but you have to. It's part of it.
So would you say then, on that basis, so personality wise and individual wise, if you've got a group page, any aspiring journalists that want to get into it, would you say it's better for them to have their own personal space to kind of associate to where they're actually operating for, but also trying to build their own personality so people can see the human behind it?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to, because the way it works is sometimes where certain reporters, because obviously if we interview a bigger name, we'll get more viewers. It's just the way it is. But sometimes when you build a good enough platform where people become a fan of your style, they'll watch regardless, and that benefits you and it benefits the fighter as well. So I'm sure I know if I interview McGregor versus somebody that's not even ranked, I know where the views are going to lie, because they're going to come in to watch him. But yeah, like you wanna. For me, it was just a little bit different because I hate using that because I've never used that as an obstacle. But being a girl, because like people won't like they don't respect you automatically like they would if I was a dude.
Hmm.
So I knew that, and it was hard. It was not easy. Like the transition in the beginning, I still get stupid comments until today. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and like I said, I've never been somebody that's been like obsessed with being on camera, so I wasn't very well versed in that regard.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was a bit of a transition. There was like a fear factor or a period of time where it was a little bit nerve wracking, and it wasn't easy in the beginning. It was hard. Comments were harsh,
Hmm.
but I knew that it had to be done. I'm like, regardless if I do it now, a year ago, or 2 years later, I'm gonna go through that anyway. So why not now?
Yeah, that's it. Putting yourself in the deep end. I mean, unnecessarily though, there is a lot of harshness going on and a lot of challenges, a lot of differences between people's views and that. So, um, as we said, I think you've definitely kind of shown how that can be done. So, talking about fear, talking about confidence in that. So, I seen you at Fight Island. I seen you interviewing a lot of people at Fight Island. It was probably watched by the globe more than most events due to the amount of kind of hype that it got and people wanting to find something, invest in something with the pandemic that was going on as well. How were you informed about being part of that? Like, did you know beforehand you were going to be a part of that, or did you get the wee phone call that kind of told you?
Yeah, they reached out to me literally like a couple weeks or a week even before, and I had no idea what was going on because obviously the pandemic was like it was in the heat of the pandemic and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to travel, and what like the laws and regulations were like. So yeah, I got the call very close. I didn't go to the first Fight Island, but I
Yeah.
got the call very close to the 253 one. So yeah, everything had to happen so fast. It was like the most
Yeah.
stressful week of my life because you get excited that the opportunity is there, but you don't even know if it's going to happen or not because there's so much paperwork, so many things to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of came like last second.
Awesome. So, in a sense, right, you're living your dreams. You're doing what you'd call, if you want to call it, work. But do you ever find any moments where it's a bit jam packed? You're like, whoa, this is unprecedented. I need a kind of break here, or is it always kind of enthusiasm? There's never a dull moment.
No, for sure. Especially the Fight Island trips were very hard because I was doing what I have to do for MMA Junkie. So as if I
Hmm.
was back home doing my regular MMA Junkie work plus the Fight Island stuff. So that was
Yeah.
impossible. Like I knew I was gonna do it. I'm not like afraid of hard work, but it was just like I'd be done sometimes recording all the way until 1 a.m. Then I'd start writing. So I'd start writing early in the morning and then try to do in between, but I can't because I'm like waiting for an interview, and sometimes you don't know when that person's going to show up, so it's like supposedly it's 5 p.m. for example, and then it turns into 5:45 by the time the fighter comes. So it's like, do I pull out my laptop? Do I start working? I can't do that. I'm like, I need to
Okay.
be ready. The camera's on. Like, what if they just come downstairs? And I'm like, so it was a bit of that, a lot of that. And then so sometimes I'd finish recording all the way until like midnight by the time we do like recaps and stuff like that, and then I pull out my laptop and start writing for MMA Junkie. So that was, and then I'd have to get up super early in the morning and rinse and repeat. And so yeah, those were very, very, very hard. Probably like, I don't know. So I felt like sometimes I was like physically gonna break down, not just mentally, but uh, in the grand scheme of things, obviously I'm very fortunate and very blessed that I got that opportunity. And I was gonna make it happen regardless. Like I
Hmm.
had no doubt. It's just that was probably the most time I was thinking like, how am I even gonna do this?
No, it's good to hear a candid account about it. I mean, everybody needs to realise that you kind of you get struggles and everything to kind of get to where you go. So that's awesome. So a wee look at UFC 264 then, right? So we've got some amazing fights. What fights intriguing you the most? I know that Poirier McGregor 3, we've got Wonderboy Burns, Condit, Max Griffin. Is there any fights within all them that you're kind of intrigued by the most?
Other than those that you've mentioned or the obvious ones, Ilya Topuria and Ryan Hall, just because I've been such a big fan of Ilya Topuria. I covered his last fight before the UFC. I've been hyping
Hmm.
him up before the UFC, so I knew how good he was.
Yeah.
And I can see the UFC are fast tracking him. And I like that they are because he's a very confident kid. He's well-rounded. He's very, very slick on the ground. Now, of course, he's going against Jiu-Jitsu Wizard and Ryan Hall. So I get the feel that we're going to, I know he says he's not scared to start in the 50-50 position or whatnot, but I get the feel he's going to let his hands go. But Ryan Hall's just so awkward in the stand-up as well. That's what makes it interesting. Like he's got that. I know he's trained with Wonder Boy and Tan Lee. So he's got that weird side kicks, and then sometimes he'll pull guard. It's sort of very, very awkward style to deal with. So it's an interesting challenge for Ilya. Obviously a good opportunity for him to get into rankings, but he's probably, like, Ryan Hall's probably the toughest puzzle to solve for him to get into that top 15. Otherwise, I'm very high on Ilya Topuria. I think he's a very skilled guy, and he's been improving. Like, he scored his first knockout in his last fight before he entered the OC. Everything else before that was like all his finishes were submission. So obviously his hands are getting better. He's done a lot of training at MMA Masters. So I'm very high on him. So anytime I cover a prospect pre-UFC, I was like that with Khamzat Chimaev. I was hyping him up since 2018, telling everyone, I'm telling you, this guy. Now I can't pretend like I knew he was going to like get that fast track, but anytime it's someone like that where I've covered them like on local shows and stuff, I gotta get excited. So definitely that's the one for me.
No, but that must be awesome for yourself as well. I mean, almost like full circle. You're there at the start of their journey. You're getting to see them progress, get to where they are. Chimaev's reputation now, unprecedented. It's insane, like the amount of following he's got, despite the exposure that he's had, and of course the inactivity. It's amazing how he's been able to build up a lot. So yeah, that's awesome. O'Malley, what are you thinking about the O'Malley fight?
I like O'Malley. Like I know that he gets a lot of stick from people and stuff like that. Like, I'm curious about the matchmaking process. He says, like he accepts whoever they give him, and I believe him. I honestly believe him. Because you can't really turn down guys in the UFC anyway. So I highly doubt the UFC were bringing him like top level guys, and he was being like, no. I feel like the UFC are being tactical the way they build them up. Yeah. I don't understand why. The Chito Vera fight was a perfect step, and obviously it didn't go his way. So that's them kind of giving him that step down, and they gave him Thomas Almeida. But I felt like after he knocked Thomas Almeida out the way he did, even though I know a lot of people say Almeida isn't the guy he used to be, felt like that was a good opportunity to give him someone at least who's on the horizon of the top 15. But they gave him Smolka. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but I like Sean O'Malley. I like what he brings to the table. He's a very exciting fighter. I don't know why he irks people. He doesn't irk me. He's always been a cool guy. I've gotten to interview him. I've even met him before. So he's I like Sean. Like, I'd tune in anytime. If I didn't cover the sport, I mean, obviously we tune into everything, but if I didn't cover the sport, I'd tune into his fight. But yeah, it's a very risky fight. Nobody knows what Chris Motini was going to bring to the table. So as much as we want to criticize him for this fight, what if he loses? That's going to be massive. So like, imagine the amount of pressure on him. Yeah,
I mean, and like it says, I mean, a win's great and stuff for his record, good to kind of put and showcase his skills, but it's not really going to put him in too much places now. I mean, everybody's waiting on that ranked opponent as well. So do you think that that's going to happen after this? I know it's not the big opponent everybody was waiting on. Do you think he'll eventually get someone ranked after this?
I do. Because the thing is, when Sean wins, he usually wins in spectacular fashion. So if he goes out there and does what Sean O'Malley does, unless he, like, I don't know, like gets taken down and isn't able to get up for the whole fight, then scores a comeback knockout, maybe not. But if he does what Sean O'Malley has been doing in his last few fights, then I don't see why not, because how many of those fights is he going to have until he gets that test? So he wanted Ricky Simón. I think Ricky Simón would make sense, especially if Ricky Simón wants that fight. I think that should be who I think he kind of alluded to that's what he was going to do after.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
No, he did. That'd be a great fight as well. So I just want to jump on and ask you, right? So you talked to a lot of fighters. Now, you spoke to Dustin Poirier at the last fight, before the last fight, and recently. So do you notice a lot of change in him then? So we noticed at the press conference, he seemed a lot more confident, and he was throwing a lot of one-liners about in a kind of way that we've not seen him act before. Talking to him on a one-to-one basis, do you see a complete change in his confidence?
Honestly, like if I compare Dustin Poirier pre-257 and pre-now, like he was kind of similar. I don't think he enjoys the whole media thing too much. He's kind of said it publicly before. So he's kind of like a bit of a tougher interview in the sense that, like, when I started out with him in this interview, the answers were very short in the beginning. I'm like, okay, I can see where this is going. So you need to kind of like loosen it up, be a little more creative with your questions. And then go back to some of the hard hitting stuff and all that. But yeah, I think it's hard because I know we all try to play like body language experts. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Like, this guy looks nervous. Like this, I don't know about this guy. Like weigh-ins, I don't know. Like whatever. But yeah, so we all try. I think with Dustin Poirier, it's kind of like how many times have we seen him look uncomfortable in a press conference or uncomfortable in an interview? So I don't think this stuff applies to Dustin. I just don't think he enjoys the media too much. I think he thinks that we're kind of super clickbaity, which we kind of are. I mean, it's kind of our job, but like maybe sometimes he thinks, I don't know, because a lot of fighters, no, I'm not talking about Dustin, but other fighters will be like clickbait. But I'm like, that's not clickbait. That's what you said. That's not clickbait. Like, yes, I think they sometimes misunderstand what clickbait is, because clickbait is like if I'm alluding to something you said. When I'm quoting what you said, that's not clickbait. You said it. So I think Dustin carries that in the back of his head, like, oh, here we go. These guys are just going to try to pull these lines from me, especially if he's fighting someone he respects, like Max Holloway and stuff. But this fight, after Conor turned heel and stuff, that's why we kind of saw that like sassy side of him, especially that he's coming off of that win. He could have done a lot more considering how McGregor was coming at him, to be fair. So I thought he was rather tame. He just had a couple of zingers there. He had a couple of good lines.
He did. It speaks volumes about his character, though. But yeah, it's certainly pumped up to be a good one. So, see, when it comes to events, then UFC events, we know you cover the sport and that. Do you do picks? Like, do you remain autonomous, or are you good to share your picks in public? Do you have a kind of pick schedule for yourself with that?
I hate doing it, but I made junkie makers do it. It's caused me so many issues in the past. I don't realize how many people actually look at these picks, whether it's the fighter, the coach, the manager. So for up to me, I'd never pick again. It's not like I gamble or put money on these things. It's not that important for me to pick. But I made junkie makers pick, and I always pray that nobody sees them. But yeah, I'd rather not. Like me personally, like when I do these Instagram lives, I don't do them as often as I used to. But when people ask me for my pick, I just kind of ignore the questions. And I'm like, I asked you this question 100 times. Then just go on MMAjunkie.com and you'll see it. Like I don't. I'd rather not, just because I know a lot of people in this industry can get very sensitive about it. And I don't mean it's like I have to pick. Like there are no friends in this thing, but it's like I have to pick one of them. So sometimes you have a good rapport with both sides, and what are you going to do?
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's okay then. I'll check your picks out on the website then. I'll save you for that. So just a couple of wee questions then. So curious, who's your favourite fighter?
It's a tough one. I feel like I could have answered that easily pre-covering the sport. Now, because it's like different. Are we talking about like watching, or are we talking about like interviewing, or you know what I mean? So growing up, it was Anderson Silva, easy for me. Like that, he was a massive reason why I got so attached to the sport. I did like George St. Pierre as well, like Rashad Evans. There are other guys, but Anderson Silva was the one that got me so like, we stay up really late to watch these fights. So Anderson Silva was the guy that made it worth it for me.
Yeah. Did you ever get
Yeah. What is it? Sorry.
Did you ever get a chance to interview him at all?
Never interviewed him, but I did watch him in London when he fought Bisping. So I met him briefly at the open workouts, but never got to interview him. No. But yeah, now, man, it's hard. I don't know. Like if I'm talking about purely watching somebody, and I have to take like the journalist hat off. I mean, McGregor and Poirier are two guys that are just incredible to watch. Yeah. Forget the antics, forget the press conference, forget anything on Conor's side. He's a showman. He's as much of a show inside as he is outside the octagon. And so is Dustin Poirier. And look at the kind of fights he's been in. Holloway, Gaethje, Alvarez, Dan Hooker. Like those are two guys. Yeah, those are two guys that I'd never miss a fight if I didn't watch all the fights.
Yeah. What do you love most about covering the sport? If you can kind of sum it up.
I'd probably say the most rewarding part is helping someone's journey. So of course it's great to interview Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, but I don't think I'm necessarily helping their journey. They get tons of media opportunities and stuff. But when I look back, and there are certain fighters, I remember interviewing Colby Covington when he was the boring wrestler, when he first started, Kamaru Usman when he was the boring wrestler. So I remember interviewing them very early on in their UFC career. Hamza Chimaev, I think I've covered like 3 or 4 of his fights. Doing that, like when I'm Calvin Kattar is another guy I've been interviewing for a very long time. So certain guys, before they hit contention status or star status or whatever, I guess the most rewarding part is when I can give a fighter a platform. Like I remember recently, I interviewed Marcelo Rojo, who ended up signing short notice with the UFC. He fought. He was supposed to step in to fight Raoni Barcelos. Fight didn't happen. He ended up fighting Charles Jourdain. But I remember I interviewed him, and I remember telling him, because I'm like, I didn't want it to be the typical like, I want to be in the UFC, or I think I can be. I'm like, is there something you want? I'm like, he said, I want to fight Raoni Barcelos. I'm like, boom, that's going to be the headline. I'm like, he needs an opponent. So we go ahead with that headline, and his management hit me up and they go, it worked. Now I don't take credit for this stuff ever. And it's not, I'm not the reason why he's in the UFC, but to do that, like for his management to come back to me and be like, holy crap, like it worked thanks to you. That was very, very rewarding. Because when I heard, I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, you got the fight. I'm like, what? You got the fight? Like, I thought it was such a long shot, because Raoni is a stud at 35. So when that happened, it's moments like these that I'm like, oh crap, like I'm actually making a difference to someone's career. Like I said, I don't take credit for it, but who knows, did the matchmaker see the article or whatever? But it's stuff like that.
That's really refreshing to hear, because I mean, we see you interviewing so many different personalities, and we've been able to see you interview a lot of people from the past and to kind of where they are now. But sometimes you don't think about the kind of journey that you've had and what you've done from that to get them to where they are now as well. So yeah, you should give yourself a wee bit credit, I would say. Even just a little bit.
Maybe, okay, a little. No, but I don't. That's the thing. That's the thing. Like I don't. It's nice to interview the big names, and I'm fortunate I get to do a lot of that. But at the same time, it's just you want to give everyone their time, and obviously writing for a site like MMA Junkie. But I like MMA Junkie are very flexible with that, and that's what I respect about it. I've interviewed people outside of the UFC as well. I've been doing a lot of PFL stuff, Bellator sometimes, One Championship and stuff. So I've really gotten to educate myself a lot more. That's one of the things I've always loved about MMA Junkie. When I was a fan, I'm like, man, they cover everything. John Morgan was everywhere. So there were certain fight nights where no media would be there, but John Morgan was always there. So I'm like, okay, I can go on MMAJunkie.com and I know I'm going to see that pre-fight interview with whoever. So that's what I've always liked about MMA Junkie. And now I'm getting to see it firsthand that, yeah, I feel like we do, obviously I'm not showing any bias, but like we do give a lot of people a platform, and me getting on there and getting to put shine on a lot of the fighters in the Middle East, whether Brave, UAE, Warriors, that's another thing I've been able to do through interviewing them or stuff. Sometimes you have to find the right topic, so it just makes sense for it to be on the site. Yeah. But just doing that, getting to cover a lot of guys that would have, never gotten that kind of coverage prior. But getting the chance to do that is like, that's why I love to do this.
And do you think then that the unique way that you do that, do you think that, how can I word it? Do you think the kind of way that you put yourself across to do that, do you think that that's very refreshing for them then? So you've got a lot of journalists. We know that they're in the UFC now. We know that they were perhaps just wanting to earn a career, earn a living. Most people want to get into the UFC. Do you feel then that the approach that you've got, is that something that many people maybe don't have?
With what, like in terms of how, like journalistically?
Yeah, journalistically. So the approach that you're putting across there, so not to say, as you said, you don't want to take credit for a lot of what you do, but perhaps in the journey that they've got into now in the UFC, as you've said, a lot of your coverage has helped them in terms of getting them more exposure due to who you're connected to and through your own respective pages. So do you think then, like, is there other journalists like you that would perhaps give them the opportunity like that as well? Or do you think you've just got, probably what I'm trying to say is, do you think you've got a good eye for talent?
I'm not gonna give myself credit for that. I did boast a little bit about Hamza Chimaev once he hit. I'm like, kind of like I told you, because I was like really hyping him on Twitter, and I was like kind of bringing up my old tweets. I'm like, I felt such a special vibe off of him. He was so confident and so dominant. But yeah, like I try to focus, I think, a lot on the Middle East, because it's so hard to give everyone. There's so many phenomenal fighters out there that we don't get a chance to hear of. But that's what I say when people ask me for advice. I always say, find your niche. Like, it's not going to pay off in the beginning. It didn't pay off when I traveled out of my own pocket to go cover Brave and all over the Middle East. I didn't gain that much out of it. If anything, I was just trying to educate myself. So it doesn't have to pay off right off the bat. That's what people need to understand. Like, it's not, even like, I'm sure if I went on UFC News Alerts and posted about Conor McGregor every single day, I could have quadrupled my followers, you know? So it's like, it doesn't have to be an instant reward right off the bat. I think when you find your niche, and then find a way to give unique coverage about whether a region, an organization, whatever it is, then I think that's the way you can grow, and it'll pay off down the line when those guys, you know, hit the big leagues and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that's the way I like it as well. I mean, if you go on your social medias, you've got many people like yourself who do that, but then you've got a lot of these meme pages and that. Whilst they could be fun, you see that it's a lot of regurgitated stuff, and they kind of get lost in the midst of trying to find their niche, and it just turns out to be a repackaged kind of version of millions of other groups and stuff. So no, that's cool. That's good advice as well. I mean, would that be, what would you say then? If you can give one sentence of advice to anybody, what would it be for anybody trying to get into that world?
I don't know about one sentence because I'm not very good at that. That was one of my issues when I first started out MMA Junkie. Like, man, I can't get like straight to the point. I just like go. I'm like, I forget about how you could just be simplicity. Like sometimes I tend to have an issue with that. But I'd say like be authentic, be yourself, and be ethical. A lot of people don't want to be ethical. Like I learned that very early on. Like credit people. Like you get so excited when you have a bit of news, and then someone else will beat you to it. And you and I had a conversation off air. Be ethical. Be ethical. Like I know it's great to say that I did it. I released it first, but it doesn't work like that. You're kind of taking away the grind of somebody else, and it doesn't matter that somebody else has 10 times your fault. It doesn't matter that somebody else is ESPN. I'm sure ESPN could live if they don't break news for one day or one fight. But that's not the point. Be ethical, because it's going to happen to you down the line, and then you're going to understand. And I'm not saying it in a sense like karma or whatever, but you have to learn how this industry works. And I can't even count the amount of times I was on top of something, completely lost sleep, tracking something, and then someone beat me to it and didn't even credit me for it. Or like beat me to it, or if I break it, not credit me. So I learned like I always try, like I even credit the photographer. I just did it with the Paddy Pimblett fight that I just posted. I think it's a Cage Warriors photographer. I'm like, all right, her name is there on it, so why not credit her? Like it's her work. So it's just little stuff like that goes a long way. And I've had sometimes like videographers and photographers that reach out to me and thank me for doing that. Like just, it's cool for them, because obviously you never know how hard other people are working, these little things that are part of the industry. So be authentic, find your niche, and be ethical. Because if you're not ethical early, these people pay attention. When you try to make it to the big out, they pay attention, and you slip up one time, it could tarnish your reputation for good, and then you'll realize it wasn't worth it at all.
No, I think ethical stands out perhaps the most as well. I mean, I think a lot of people in the kind of popularity contest, if you will, tend to forget about that, because you know yourself, like you says about the Conor McGregor type thing, anybody can make a page, put the right hashtags on, and they're going to get all the follows. But I think what you say is being ethical, finding your kind of key niche and stuff seems to be the way forward. And as I said, it's paid off for you in that sense. As you said, it didn't happen. It wasn't an overnight kind of thing. You had to grind a lot to get there. So, yeah, I think anybody who does listen to this, I think it will be very beneficial. So, Farah, I really appreciate your time. The work you do is tremendous. Your articles, interviews, your questioning, it's very articulate. Anyone wanting to get into this industry, at the end of the day, you're still a fan. You identify as a fan. You've got in here through hard work and grind, started where most of us have started, and look where you are. So anybody being inspired by you, I think you're a really good example of that, and hopefully a lot of people can learn and continue to enjoy your stuff.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your kind words, and I appreciate you saying that you were there from 5K followers, because I remember those days. I remember how excited I was when I got 1K. So when people tell me that, when they tell me that they've been following from the very beginning, it means a lot, because I remember those days. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And long may that continue.
Hopefully. I mean, it's a burden. This page is a burden. I say that like with a massive smile on my face, but I credit it. That's the thing. I feel like I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that page. But now with juggling all this stuff, it's a burden. But like I said, wouldn't be there without it. So
no, exactly. Well, you take care, and let's enjoy the fights tomorrow night and have a good one.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
No, you take care, all right?
All right, you too. Thank you.